Hey everyone, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Keisha and today I'm going to be talking about my favorite middle grade books of 2021. So it's a pretty gloomy day outside today, so I thought I would sit down and do an extra video for my 2021 end of the year videos and talk about some of my favorite middle grades. I feel like I've kind of become known for having some pretty decent middle grade recommendations as someone who has been a children's librarian and who still continues to do a middle grade book club and has read quite a few middle grade. I feel like I am pretty decent at recommending them. I wouldn't say I'm the best by any means, but I have found some that I absolutely love, and this year has probably been one of my favorite years to read middle grade because I've read so many good ones. I do actually have 10 middle grade books that are my favorites from this year, so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. The first book is actually one that I don't own, and it is called The Lion of Mars by Jennifer L. Holm. This is a book that I didn't realize was a favorite until I started kind of reminiscing on what I read this year and remembering this book and just always thinking about this book. I noticed how much I thought about the book throughout the year. Even though it wasn't a 5-star read for me, it was actually a 4-star read, but it was just so good. So this story is about a boy named Belle, and Belle is 11 years old, and he lives on Mars. He is one of many colonies that live on Mars. He's part of, I think, like the American colony that lives on Mars. And despite the fact that he lives on Mars, he lives a pretty normal life, or at least normal by his terms. He loves cats, he has best friends, but there are some secrets that are being kept from him by the adults, and he doesn't quite understand those, so he's trying to figure that out. He is trying to figure out why their colony doesn't communicate with other colonies on Mars and why they're so isolated. And then a virus breaks out, and it is up to Belle and his friends to save the grown-ups, because all the grown-ups are the ones who have the virus. The kids don't have the virus, and he is going to have to reach out to other colonies, which is something they don't do, in order to save them. I really don't know what it is about this book. Like I said, this is a sci-fi. I don't read a lot of sci-fi, but I definitely want to read more sci-fi middle grade because I really enjoyed this book. I felt like it was pretty slow going throughout the first little bit, and then the end of it was just kind of really quick and abrupt, but I think it was a good middle grade. I gave it 4 stars, and like I said, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. It's one I would like to own someday, and it's one I would definitely recommend. Coming in at number 9 on my list is A Mall Unbound by Aisha Saeed. This book was such a pleasant surprise for me this year. I read it for the Homebody Book Club, and I'm not quite sure if I would have picked it up otherwise, just because it's just so random. Like, I don't read a lot of contemporary middle grade. I just read more spooky. And this one follows our main character, Amal, and Amal has always dreamed of becoming a teacher. But she lives in Pakistan, and life in Pakistan for her is a little bit rougher. She ends up basically insulting this guy that's in higher power, and she ends up being an indentured servant. So you get to see what life is like for some people in Pakistan that are in indentured servitude, and it's not like she was just treated bad by the higher ups. Other servants would even treat Amal bad, and so it's crazy to see kind of like what happens in other countries. Like, as somebody who lives in America and has only experienced America, I know that we go through some stuff that's kind of rough here as well, but it was such a culture shock to read this and see what happens in other countries. So I found myself loving this book. It's one of my favorites, and it's also beautiful. I mean, just look at that cover. It is one of my favorite covers and one of my favorite books. I gave it 4 stars, and I do want to say a quote from the book. This was just such an impactful and inspiring story. I do want so many more people to read this. And this is just one quote that I thought was so good. It says, "If everyone decided nothing could change, nothing ever would." So I highly recommend picking up A Mall Unbound if you have not already. Coming in at number 8 on my list is Alone by Megan E. Freeman. I picked up this book because it kind of reminded me of The Hatchet, because it's a survival story and it's middle grade. And if you're anything like me, if you're around my age, you probably read The Hatchet when you were younger in school, because I definitely did, and I thought it was really interesting. And this is kind of like a female, it's really not like a female Hatchet, but there's a girl, it's a survival story, but this one takes place in a town. It's not so much in the wilderness. And what happens is we have our main character, her name is Maddie, she's 12 years old, and she is trying to have this secret sleepover with her friends, like away from her parents, but things end up going wrong, and she ends up being by herself when her town is evacuated. There's been something like some kind of emergency that happens. You don't really know what's going on until the end, and she is alone. So she has to learn how to survive. Not only does she have to fend for herself, get food for herself, find home for herself, she also has to fight off wild animals and stay safe from looters and natural disasters. So this is a really incredible story. The writing is absolutely beautiful, and it's written in verse, so it doesn't take very long at all to read. I will say that I think this is more of an upper middle grade story because there are a few curse words in this book. There is also some heavy content, and there is one instance of animal cruelty that I felt like was super unnecessary to the story. I did not like it at all. If you don't like animal cruelty, you might just want to skip over that one part, but it is a small part. I do think this was a really good story. Like I said, it has really beautiful writing. It was a really neat survival story. It's different than anything I've read, and I gave this one 5 stars. Number 7 on my list is a book that we read for my middle grade book club, and this is such a good book, you guys. It's Midnight at the Barclay Hotel by Flora Bradley. This is one of my new favorite books and one of my new favorite authors. I'm so excited to read more from Flora Bradley. This book was just pure genius. If you like Clue and if you like murder mysteries and like spooky paranormal stuff, I definitely recommend checking this one out. It says hunting ghosts and solving the case before checkout. So you have JJ, I don't know if I remember all their names. I know this is Emma, and I can't remember her name. Why can I not remember her name? Penny. JJ, Penny, and Emma. And JJ and his mom get invited to come to the Barclay Hotel for a weekend, and they come with all these other characters, and they find out the reason why they're there is because somebody was murdered and his mom is a suspect. And so they all come together. There are twists in this book. This is a middle grade with twists that I did not see coming. You might see them coming. I did not see them coming. I thought it was a really good mystery. I had no idea who done it, and I thought it was really good. So I would say if you like Clue and murder mysteries and you don't want something super scary and you like middle grades, check this one out. There are also, well, I thought I'd found one. There are also illustrations throughout, and I loved those. I think this is very beautifully illustrated. And like I said, I'm really excited to check out more from this author because this was just so well done. Also, Flora Bradley actually sent a little postcard to me as well because I had requested, or she had said since we were reading this for book club, she was like, I'll send you guys some bookmarks. So she sent me a little postcard with a little note and some bookmarks for my kiddos. So that was like the best thing in the world. I'm telling you guys, middle grade authors are so sweet. I know like adult authors are too, but these middle grade authors are the sweetest people in the world. So yes, if you like mysteries, I highly recommend checking out Midnight at the Barclay Hotel. Number 6 on the list is one of my favorite series, and that is the Cassidy Blake series by V.E. Schwab or Victoria Schwab. This is the second book in the series, and it is Tunnel of Bones. If you can't already tell from my shelves over here, this is one of my favorite series. I own the hardback and the paperback of these. I don't have the paperback of Bridge of Souls yet, but the reason I like the paperback is a reason I'll tell you in a minute because I realized I need to tell you about this book. So if you don't know, this series is about Cassidy Blake, and Cassidy had a near-death experience, and now she has this gift of being able to see through the veil or see ghosts. She also has a best friend who is a ghost. His name is Jacob, and he follows her around as well. And Cassidy's parents are ghost hunters. They actually have a TV show where they travel to the most haunted places all over the world, and they film. And it's so funny because they really can't see ghosts or really sense ghosts, but Cassidy can see ghosts, and they have no idea that she can. So it's a really cool story. The first book took place in Edinburgh, Scotland, and I loved that. This one takes place in Paris, France, in the catacombs. And the reason that I love the paperbacks and recommend you getting the paperbacks if you can is because in the back of these, they have extras so you can see photos from the different places in the book. So like there's a picture of the catacombs. Look at that. How stinking creepy is that? So I love because Victoria Schwab bases her writing and her stories off of some like local legends, and she bases it off like the history of these places and based on actual places in general, like in real life. So I think these are super cool. I highly recommend checking them out. If you like good, spooky, middle grade ghost stories, this series is where it's at. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars only because it did not quite meet the same standards as like City of Ghosts. But I mean, really, City of Ghosts was 5 stars. This is 4.5. I don't know. Like they're basically the same, but it's so hard to beat like the first. It's like any book you read, the first is typically the best. Okay, we're getting down to the top 5 now. So you may remember me talking about this earlier this year. This book just gave me all the feels. It surprised me and it made me so happy, and that is A Place to Hang the Moon by Kate Albus. This is a World War II historical fiction book, and it follows our main characters, Anna, who is 9, Edmund, who is 11, and William, who is 12. They are brothers and sisters, and they have been in kind of a sticky situation. They've lost their parents. I think they lived with their grandmother, and now their grandmother has passed away, and so they're orphans. But they get sent off to the English countryside during the war to keep them safe, and they're actually hoping to find a family while they're there. So they end up getting placed in different foster homes while they're there, and oh my gosh, it makes me angry how some of these families treat these kids. But overall, this story was just such a warm hug because these kids find this library and they find Nora, the librarian, and she is like the best person. Think Miss Honey from Matilda. She is the best person. And the kids come to the library and they check out these new books, and it makes my heart so happy, you guys. This book is so cozy. It's a warm hug. It's a great read if you just need something like relaxing, cozy, good. There are sad parts, there are hard parts, but man, this is such a good book. If you like Matilda, like I said, I already mentioned Miss Honey, I think you would probably like this book. And if you like historical fiction, the writing was so good in this. I loved it so much. I completely fell in love with the main characters in this book, and I cannot recommend this enough. I don't even have all the words to articulate my feelings towards this book. This was a 5-star read and one that I highly recommend you picking up. Coming in at number 4 is Ghost Girl by Ali Melaninko. I don't remember if this is her debut or not. It may not be, but I thought it was her debut. Either way, Ali Melaninko has won me over. She writes spooky middle grades, and this one is so good. It actually rivaled Small Spaces for me. So this story follows Z Puckett, and Z is kind of an outcast at school. She loves ghost stories, and she gets made fun of and called Ghost Girl because one day she actually sees like scary dogs and hears things, and she gets this nickname of Ghost Girl because now she's saying she sees things in real life, and they're like, oh, you're just making up stories. So we have her and her best friend Elijah, and then you also have Nellie, who's like the mean girl in school, and they all kind of get in a situation where they have to team up together to figure out what is going on. This book was just wild. Do you know those like movies and those, I guess, just scary stories where people just have like that smiley stare, or like those eyes, like where you know, like they're trying to look normal, but you can see the evil behind their eyes? That is how I feel with this book. Like I can see that, I can visualize that, and that just like chills me to the bone. So this book definitely rivaled Small Spaces. If you know me, you know that Small Spaces by Catherine Arden is one of my favorite spooky middle grades. And Ali Melaninko really is giving Catherine Arden a run for her money with Ghost Girl because this was so spooky and so good. The writing was good. I do think there were a couple of illustrations throughout, not many. I think it may have just been like chapter headers. That may have been what it was. I don't know. Maybe I'm just visualizing so much in my head that I think all this stuff is like actually there. But if you need a good ghost story, I highly recommend picking this one up. I do think that it wrapped up a little bit easy in the end. I would have liked to see a little bit more happen before. I don't know, it kind of felt like it was just very conveniently wrapped up, but nonetheless, this is a 5-star read for me and a new favorite spooky middle grade. Coming in at number 3 was such a surprise for me because it is Behind the Bookcase by Mark Steensland. I have been trying to read this book for a couple of years now. I picked this book up because it reminded me of Coraline, because there's a girl and there's a secret door and there's a black cat, and I was like, okay, this looks like Coraline. And you know, I picked up another book that reminded me of Coraline and I didn't like it as much. This one is where it's at. Oh my goodness, I don't even know what to say about it. It's about this girl named Sarah, and Sarah's grandmother has just passed away, and so now her and her brother and her parents are going to her grandmother's estate, and they have to kind of like pack things up, get things ready to sell. And while they're there, she finds this note that her grandmother left, and it starts by saying, strange things are happening behind the bookcase. So Sarah starts to explore and finds out some pretty creepy things that are happening. This book is full of secret doors and creepy creatures, good versus evil. I really feel like there is like a underlying element of like I said, good versus evil, but I think about it in regards to like my faith as a Christian. Like I just saw some like parallels there, which made me love it even more, because when you put that together, like you don't put spooky and like Christian stuff together very much, But oh my gosh, like this just gave me everything I could have wanted. The illustrations in here were beautiful. Like I know like they look spooky, but I love this illustration art style. It's just amazing, and it really brought the story to life. I highly recommend picking this up if you like spooky middle grades. You know that I do. I wish that I had more words to articulate my feelings because like I said, I just feel like this is such a good story. I read it in one sitting, if that tells you anything, but it's kind of like, it does remind me of Coraline still. It's also been said to be kind of similar to like Alice in Wonderland, Twilight Zone vibes. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, I definitely recommend picking up Behind the Bookcase. The second book on my list is Dead Voices by Catherine Arden, which should come as no surprise. This is the second book in the Small Spaces series, and I actually think this one spooked me more than the first one. You guys know I said Small Spaces spooked me. I'll never look at scarecrows the same way again. Don't read the book in the dark with a nightlight. This is the same. So this one is good for the winter time right now. So if you need a spooky book, wintry book to read right now, this is it. But pick up Small Spaces first. This is following the same character, so you do need to read Small Spaces before you read this one. But we have Ollie, Brian, and Coco, and they've had their experience from the first book, and then they come into this book, and they are going to this like ski lodge, and there's a mysterious ghost hunter there named Mr. Volland, and strange things start to happen. Ollie's having nightmares about frostbitten girls. Coco is seeing shadowy figures. And Brian is positive that the stuffed bear in the lobby was on its hind legs when they arrived, not on all fours. So there's some creepy things happening at this place. There is one thing that is in this book that I don't like as much. I don't want to say it because it's a spoiler, but there are certain like paranormal or spooky or witchy elements that I don't like because I would not recommend messing with certain things in real life. Like I'm not one of those people. I'll read spooky books, but I don't like certain, like I would never go ghost hunting. I would never use a Ouija board. I would never do things like that in real life. And so I don't always like to read about that stuff. And so this does have one thing that I don't really like, and I hate that it's in a middle grade because it presents it as such an innocent thing. And I don't know. So like I hesitate, would I hand this to my child or not? But I feel like if I taught my child like before they read this about certain things, it would be okay. So just know that going in. But I cannot rate this less than 5 stars. I just can't do it. This book was so scary. It was so good. It chilled me to the bone. It was, oh my gosh, it was so good. It was so much better than Small Spaces. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. Like, I love Small Spaces, but this one topped it. And I'm really hoping that it keeps that pace with the rest of the series. This is the second book. I also have Dark Waters that I still need to read. And she has a third book coming out later this year, and it's something about smiles. And I'm like, it has clowns on the cover. I just mentioned how smiles and like the eyes like scare me, and now there's like clowns, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Catherine Arden, are you trying to make me pee my pants? Like, I don't want to be that scared, but like I do want to be that scared. You know what I mean? Like, oh my goodness, it's so good. Definitely check out Catherine Arden's series if you haven't already. All right, I don't know if you guys could have guessed this or not because I went back and forth on whether or not it needed to be a spooky book at number 1 or not, but it's actually not a spooky book. Surprise, surprise. If this does not tell you you need to read this book, I don't know what does, because if something tops a spooky book for me, it's got to be good. And that is Until Tomorrow, Mr. Marsworth by Sheila O'Connor. This is my favorite middle grade book that I read this year, and it actually ended up topping A Place to Hang the Moon, which is crazy because I didn't think that it would. While A Place to Hang the Moon was one of my favorites, while it was a warm hug, this story just really captured my heart. It made me cry, and it makes me want to cry thinking about it because I'm literally tearing up. This story follows Renee Kelly, and Renee Kelly befriends the town recluse, Mr. Marsworth. This is set during the Vietnam War, and there's some really hard-hitting topics in here. But let me tell you, this book is written in letters, and it really makes it more personal and real when you read a book that's written in letters. And it just makes it something more. I wish more authors would write like this. But anyways, yeah, this book is written in letters between Mr. Marsworth and Renee Kelly. It's set during the Vietnam War. And so it's 1968. Renee's 11 years old. Yes, the 11-year-old gets on your nerves every now and then when you read this book because she's an 11-year-old. She thinks she knows everything, but she doesn't. She has to learn the hard way. But Renee has 2 older brothers, Dare and Billy, and her mother had passed away. Her dad is working, so they're staying with their grandmother, I believe for the summer, and so they are in Minnesota, And Renee starts this paper route, and she ends up, like I said, coming across Mr. Marsworth, who's the town recluse, and they strike up this unlikely friendship that is the best thing in the world. There are so many different things that happen at the very end of this book, like back to back to back to back, that just made me boo-hoo cry and sob because it was just so good. Like, I wish I had words. I wish I had words, and I hope the emotions that are being conveyed right now are adequate enough to tell you how much this book just really impacted my life, how good it was. The Vietnam War is a war that I feel like is probably one of the most controversial in American history. It's a war that some people didn't think we should have been involved in, and so there are some hard kind of topics around this because some people think we should have fought in it, some people don't think that we should have, and this book does tackle those subjects as well. I was so invested in the story. I was so invested in Mr. Marsworth and Renee Kelly's relationship, and just what you find out throughout the whole thing is just so good. So if I have told you to read this book, please read it. And if I have not told you, this is me telling you. It is historical fiction. It is middle grade, but it is such an easy book to get through. You will want to pick it up every time you put it down. It's just wonderful. And like I said, if this beats out a spooky book for me, you know it's got to be good. So this is definitely my favorite middle grade book of the year. Okay, you guys, minus The Line of Mars, this is my stack of my favorite middle grade books. If you like middle grade, or even if you don't, I highly recommend checking out middle grade books. They are just, I don't know, they give you something that you don't get in adult books. And while I love my adult books, I also will always cherish middle grade. I don't believe that you have to be a kid to read middle grade. I think adults can get something out of it too. So if you need somewhere to start, I would recommend any of these books. They are absolutely fantastic. So let me know down in the comments below if you have read any of these and what you thought about them, or let me know if I've piqued your interest in any of them. And also tell me what some of your favorite middle grade books are, whether it's a book you read this year or it's a book that you've read in the past. Tell me what your favorites are, because I'm always looking for great middle grade recommendations as well. That is all I have for you guys today. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you all so much, and I will see you in the new year. Bye, friends.